Hello, everyone, and welcome to Accessible Tech Thursdays. Today, we're covering accessible documents. My name's Neil Beck, and I'll be hosting today. If there's any questions and comments, feel free to put them in the chat box, and we'll share the resources on the YouTube page underneath the video, so you can access those. So, Accessible Tech Thursdays has a number of different webinars, and we have a really good resource where you can access these now in logical order. It'll give you a kind of a map. So if you follow that source at the bottom right there, bit.ly accessible edtech, it'll give you a link to that guide there, and it'll split into the tools, your delivery, accessible features, improve well-being and support, provide specialist support, and also assessing your learners and your provision. So today, we're making sure that we focus on inclusive learning. So inclusive learning and teaching is an entitlement to an experience that respects all users regardless of their needs or access to technology. Issues accessing VLEs, like many of us are using these days, on mobile devices in particular, are difficult for students requiring additional support. And it isn't always about the VLEs themselves or the lack of ability from the learners. Often it's about the content within. And that quote was taken from the JISC VLE review report 2020. And the other thing that was found through all the VLE reviews was that learners and students express frustration at a lack of consistency across the VLE. So very different teaching staff having different practices and using the VLE, using lecture capture or external tools and things like that. So we're not just thinking about making things accessible, but we're also thinking about giving students some continuity and some way of making sense of the educational resources that are presented to them. So why accessible documents? It means they can be used as many people as possible. So we're including those with impaired vision, motor difficulties, cognitive impairments or learning disabilities, deafness or impaired hearing, and it's worth considering that at least 1 in 5 people in the UK have a long-term illness, impairment or disability. There is legislation around this as well, so it's worth considering that if you're not complying with this, then you could be putting yourself at risk, you and your organisation. There's coverage in the Equality Act 2010, the Public Sector Equality Duty, the Public Sector Bodies Accessibility Regulations 2018. And generally, the risk here isn't that you're going to be inspected, perhaps, but it's just that someone will have a bad experience and perhaps look to take legal action because they don't feel that they can access the curriculum in the same way that other learners. A lot of the time we try not to emphasize compliance, we try and emphasize the possibilities here. You know, everyone wants to make their learners learning accessible. So that's generally where we focus, but it is worth being aware that you could be putting yourself at some risk if you don't keep up with this. So who's responsible for what? I think this is really important because sometimes we don't know who is going to be focusing on what section. So there are people like myself who focus on the technology, or you've got IT professionals. And what we can do is, because we've got some basic tech skills, we can create templates, we can run training sessions for people, we can run audits, and we can guide on the use of inbuilt accessibility checkers. And I'll be doing some of that later on in this webinar. For those working directly with the students, maybe kind of assistants or people who are, or even parents, actually in this kind of modern climate, then it's worth checking that the students can access the resources and just highlighting and reporting back the issues as they occur. For the teachers, there's a lot of responsibility here because they have to create and maintain the accessible resources. They have to understand some of the basic accessibility principles and highlight issues as they occur. And it's really important that any technologists or IT professionals kind of link in closely with the teachers, because they have a really tough job to create so many resources on a regular basis, and that can be quite tiring. So the more you can do to create resources like templates and help people with inbuilt accessibility checkers, the less work that the teacher has to do. Got a really useful model that I thought I'd start off with. I love a good visual, and I think this is a really useful one. This is from AbilityNet, and the link is at the bottom there, and it's the Sculpt layout. So it stands for S is for structure, so you're looking at heading styles. C is for color contrast. U is for use of images. L is for links, hyperlinks. P is for using plain English, and T is for table structure. And we'll be covering all of those in more depth. But if you're looking for something that's a good printout or something to help people to consider this on a day-to-day basis, it's really good to have this around in places where people are working. So what I've done next is I've adapted some questions from the National Disability Authority on make your websites more accessible. Now, it comes from a website source, but actually a lot of what's created there applies to when we're creating resources now, because even virtual learning environments are counted these days as websites in terms of accessibility, and a lot of the things apply. There's just different ways of achieving them. So have you provided a suitable text equivalent for everything that's not text? So with the example of this webinar, I'm talking, but what there'll also be is captions built into YouTube, and there's also a transcript in the folder that you can access, so you can read through that. Did you structure your information so that your learners' technology can understand its structure? So probably the most common learners' technology that they're talking about there is likely to be a screen reader. So if the screen reader is reading in a logical order down a page, will it read things in order, or have you created text boxes in different orders and then move them around? Because that can really throw screen readers. Can learners get all the important information from your videos and audios, even if they can't see them? So for me, I'm reading out what I'm saying on the page, and I'm trying to describe any images as they come along. That's relevant for me in this webinar. With a lot of things as alt text, and that's what we'll be coming on to a bit later. Is there enough color contrast between the resources, written information, and its background? So it's why we've got quite a plain white background in this presentation, because if we could have a really swish looking background there, but it can alter the contrast, the difference between the text and the background color. Can learners get all the important information from your videos and audios, even if they can't hear them? And again, that's coming back to that text for everything that's not text. Is there enough volume contrast between your resources, spoken information, and its background noises? Well, luckily, I'm in quite a quiet room at the moment, and there's not much going on here, so I'm fortunate. But if I was recording it somewhere else, then it is worth considering maybe getting a noise cancelling headset. It's very easy to be disturbed. Now we've had to change our working styles. Got some other key questions. So can your learners use your resources with only a keyboard? That might be an accessibility tool you need to think of. It's also the case for switches, because you can remap a keyboard to switches as well. So if I hit one switch, it might emulate the tab key and tab through options, and another switch might select it and do the enter key. So it's a good practice, I think, just to kind of tab through resource and see if you can access them with a keyboard. Do your resources give your learners enough time to read and use them? And that's something that lots of learners have reported having issues with, is having things put up onto a whiteboard, and then not enough time to take down the information. So a lot of that can be done by sharing resources in advance, and then they can read them in their own time and go back to them and repeat them as many times as they need to. Have you made sure that nothing flashes quickly? That's an important one for epilepsy. Can your learners get around your website easily? Not necessarily website, could be a report or a resource. And we'll be talking a little bit about how to navigate quickly through a document. Can your learners find what they're looking for in your resources? So a search tool is quite useful there. Yeah. Can your learners read your information easily, and can they understand it? A lot of that's to do with the language that you use. Do your resources work as your learners would expect it to work? So that's a kind of expectation thing. So if there's a text box, learners expect to write in that text box. That's an example. Do your resources help prevent learners from making mistakes? So a good way to do this is maybe to kind of, where possible, observe learners or talk them through things to make sure that they're able to process it, not just how you thought it might work. Do your resources explain your learners' mistakes clearly? Really good way to do that is to be able to leave audio feedback. That's a really accessible way, especially if you can combine it with written. Have you constricted your resources so they will work on as many modern computers, phones, and browsers as possible? That's a tricky one, and you've just got to make sure that you maybe test it on a phone or mobile device as well. So the first one I'm going to deal with is structuring documents. This is really important. And the things that we're looking for here are headings. We're looking for lists, whether they're ordered, unordered, listed, tables, and language changes. So I'm just going to quickly share my document and demonstrate a few of these for you. So this is my example document that you should be able to see now. So the first thing here is I've got some text with some kind of short paragraphs around it. And at the moment, it isn't the clearest to read. And what Microsoft Word and other word processors have is something called styles. So what I can do is, this is my title, then I can call it a title. Oh, great, and it's pulled up a spelling mistake there. That wasn't even an example. Okay, and for the next one, this is a subtitle. So I'm going to give that heading 1, but you do have heading 1, heading 2, and you can break those down even further. But we're just going to use heading 1 for now, just to title up all of these. So there's a few advantages straight away to this. I can change my headings, so I can modify this, and maybe I want them a little bit larger. Maybe I want them to be size 18, then I can do that, and then I can click OK, and it will change all the headings. So that means if I want to make a format change in a document, rather than going through each subtitle, I can just do it like that. So it's a lot easier to work with straight away. As I'm creating a document, I can minimize these, and as long as those working with them know that you can unminimize them, that you can expand them again. That's an important tip on this. But yeah, it can make it, especially if you're working with large blocks of text, being able to move around like that is quite important. So it's already more accessible because I can see clearly there. What it also does is it means that we can go to different views. So if we go to view here and we go to navigation pane, it's laid out all the subtitles along the side. So if you imagine this was a document that's pages and pages long, it just means that we can click on those and it'll jump to that section. So that's really useful. You also notice there's a navigation here. So if there was a particular word that I wanted to highlight, like if I wanted to know about teachers, then you can find any particular word, which is quite useful for learners. The other thing you can do, once you've created these headings, it gives you a few options. And this is one of these tips that helps you to make things more accessible, but also makes your documents more professional. So what we can do is we can go to references, and then we can go table of contents. And there's a few different formats here, a few different default formats. I'm just going to go with the first one, automatic table 1. And what it does is it populates a contents page based on your subtitles. So it's got technologists, IT professionals, student facilitators, teachers, and it's got a contents page there at the front. And it tells you what page they're on as well. As I add more subtitles in there, it won't update until you click on Update Table and Update Entire Table. Okay, so that's important to remember, just so you have an updated table at the end of writing your document. The other useful thing there is if I go to File and Export and create a PDF document, I'll just save this onto my web page, onto my home page, sorry. And that'll take a few seconds. Then I've got a document now that can't be typed in. So if you're worried about students kind of typing in documents that when you just want them to read it, then this is really useful. And what happens in this document now, if I click on one of the buttons, one of the subtitles, it will take me directly to that page. So it's really good for creating accessible PDFs where you can click around and quickly navigate to other areas in your document. So if I just show you that on the page, so this is my PDF. I've got the title there, and there's the contents, and I can click on it and it will jump me to the section that I want. So something that's really useful for Word, but also really useful for exporting into PDFs as well. Now, below here, I've got an example of some lists, and it's something that you might not have thought of particularly. We just write lists, you know, as a matter of course. But what we've done is we've used the inbuilt tools within Microsoft to prepare this list. And it makes sense because this is a process. So there has to be an order. We can't be deglazing using the tomatoes being the first thing we've done before the ingredients. So there has to be an order to this. And that's why we've used the list, the ordered list. So 1, 2, 3, 4. We've made it clear what the order is. It might be A, B, C, D, but it's clear there's an order there. And within that, we've got an unordered list. So cooking the beans for 45 minutes and cutting vegetables in small cubes, doesn't matter what order we do those in, just as long as they are done at some point. So that's a nested list, and that combines two types of lists, so an ordered list and an unordered list. And that's important because students will make sense of these lists, and they'll also be using text-to-speech, and it will read it out in a certain way, and it will tell you list number 1 of and how many it's of. So rather than a list that might go on forever, you know what order it is in. So those are a few of the things that you need to consider when we're structuring a document. Tables, it's good to use the inbuilt insert table in Microsoft Word. Again, so screen readers can make sense of that. And the same with language changes as well. Make sure that they're marked in a different language so that screen readers can make sense of them. Alt text is a useful way of being able to describe images, charts, videos, audio, and presentation. So I can demonstrate this in a presentation that I've created before. So I have, here we go, this is deliberately a presentation that was not created to be accessible because I knew exactly who was going to be there. And we knew that there was going to be no accessibility needed. So what I can do is if I click on the picture and I go to the picture here, you can see there's alt text, and this is in the built-in, this is in the Office 365 version of PowerPoint. But yeah, if you right click on an image and go to the properties, you can generally find the alt text on the desktop version. So alt text, at the moment, there's nothing there. I can get it to generate a description for me. Let's see what it comes up with. So it says graphical user interface application. Now that isn't very useful for me. So I'm going to change that a little bit. It doesn't really describe what that picture is. So I'm going to describe that as a webinar outlining drop-in sessions with a video of a presenter. It has subtitles. There we go. So now I've written up the alt text for that. So anyone with a screen reader who accesses this document now can have that. And that's the same in Microsoft Word as well. So there we go. That's alt text. And I'll take it back to the presentation now. I've included recorded videos, slides, and things like that, because sometimes you might be inserting those into documents. If you want more details on this, we have a accessible videos webinar, so you can access that in the playlist. But I just thought I'd touch on a few important things here. So if you've got recorded video with slides and you're talking it through, then it's good to have captions. It's good to have audio descriptions in the videos. And I'm actually going to do an audio description in a bit, which should be helpful to give an idea. And they say, or a transcription that details the visual information and the audio information. They say or, but sometimes it's good to do both because people do like to access things in different ways. Recorded videos and slides without audio, you need effective text descriptions or effective audio descriptions of everything going on, and effective text descriptions ideally. So that's best case scenario for that resource. For recorded audio without video, just need some kind of effective text description there so everyone can access it. For live delivery, there is an expectation of captions, and that's built into lots of other things. Again, we go into this a lot more in our video calls webinar. Audio, ideally real-time captioning, or a script, but only if it's followed. And that can be quite difficult because you can't talk freely then. So key principles, just partly to refresh, use a proper heading structure when you're creating documents, write in short, simple sentences, write in plain language and avoid jargon and abbreviations. If you're using abbreviations a lot through a document, rather than writing out in full, sometimes you can just put in brackets next to the first one. As long as you know people are going to read through it, then that should be fine. Use a common plain font and a text size of at least 12 points. And I think sans serif is the type of font that you need, really. Any sans serif font. So that means without kind of elaborate curls or things that might be distracting for learners who are trying to read text. So use proper list formatting for numbered or bullet lists. We've covered that. Providing a meaningful description of important images. Check the accessibility of your document using Word's built-in checker, and we can show you that, and use hyperlinks as well, and we can demonstrate that. So just going to quickly show you Microsoft's free accessibility checker tool. This is pretty handy. Okay, so keeping your documents accessible, you can open any Office file, and opening in the app works best. Select a review along the ribbon at the top there, and then check accessibility. Any errors or warnings will be in the results. So we've got missing alternative text here. Select a drop down to review the issue. So when we click on there, you can click the arrow button for recommended actions. So it's rectangle 2. We're going to select an action to fix it. We're going to mark it as decorative because people don't need to know what it is. We can use the inbuilt table tool, and that's another fix as well. So you can also keep track of issues in real time. You can select keep accessibility checker running while I work, and then rather than having to deal with a lot at the end, you can deal with it as you go along. So that's Microsoft's accessibility checker, which is pretty handy. Now, we're coming to the end of the webinar. If you've got any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat and I'll make sure I cover them. To mention our extra resources, we've got web accessibility guidelines there, which will give you the full guidelines, and they're very in depth, but they are that kind of Bible of what is accessible and what standards you need to meet. There's JISC, there's a really good starter article on getting started with accessibility and inclusion. And AbilityNet also have some fantastic accessibility resources, as we demonstrated earlier in this. And what I'm going to do now is, because I mentioned how useful hyperlinks are, I'm just going to show you how I added these in this resource. So I'm just going to share screen. There we go. Here's my presentation. So if I right click on a set of words, and this already has a hyperlink, then it will give me some options. So because there's a hyperlink there, I can open hyperlink, I can copy the hyperlink, I can edit it, or I can remove it. If I go to edit hyperlink, I'm just going to copy that for a second. You don't need to do this, but this is just to demonstrate. So then I can remove that hyperlink. Now, if I have a website that I want to link to, I can choose the text that I want to turn into a link. It could be 2 words, it could be 3 words, it could be a whole sentence, whatever makes sense to the learner. So what is written as the title should make sense. So these are the web accessibility guidelines. It doesn't say click here, because click here, when I read that doesn't make any sense. So it is the web accessibility guidelines. So I can right click, we go to hyperlink, and it just gives me a little option to put the address in there. You can generally ignore the bit here, these folders. That will just link through to your existing folders, which isn't much good to learners because they can't access your folders unless you've got something badly up with your security. So I'm just going to put this web address in here. And you can do that with copy and paste. So Control-C to copy, Control-V to paste. I'm just going to go OK. There we go. And then I've got my hyperlink. Now, because I'm in editing mode, if I click on it, it won't do anything because it's just giving me the chance to edit it. If I want to test it, I can hold, I can go right click and then open hyperlink, and that'll test it out. Or if I go into the slideshow mode, I can click on it and then it'll open directly to that page. So that's hyperlinks. And so you can put those in a document and use it to make an accessible guide, so you can link off to other things that the students might need to read. So coming to the end now, we've got our final 2 webinars coming up. So on the 4th of March at 4:15, led by Erica Smith, we've got our Parents and Carers webinar. And that's something that you can send out to parents and carers, and it will just give them a really useful kind of way of starting to understand some about accessible technology. We've also got the Techability Standards, which are a full guide of a roadmap of accessible technology, and that'll be on the 11th of March, and that'll be our final session. That'll be at 4:15 again, and we'll have a drop-in session at the end, so if you have any student issues, you can bring them there. So thank you everyone for attending today. If you would like some more support, then you can have some extra assistance from the EdTech Demonstrator program. You can visit edtech-demonstrator.lgfl.net, and I've got the links on the right hand side. I'll leave the chat open for a little bit just in case anyone's got any comments or questions. Thank you everyone for listening, and see you next week. Okay, thank you, bye.